easiest ways are the best.
Make most of the people happy. Make the most.
You don't ever want that?
else.
Seems like everybody leaves after.
That happens with us too. I'll be like, really old and we're still here. You know, there's a reason that little rug is over there.
Garrett's giving a lot of those out up in Turner.
Oh, the cat was playing.
Keeps going. He's like, gotta go up.
Cats don't have thumbs, they can't put the rug back.
Yeah, maybe though.
Council meeting
Look at
January
yours,
22,
Mr.
You all set?
2013.
Roger?
Oh, yes.
Ready?
Nobody never stopped me
I think
before.
it is 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, I'd like to bring this meeting to order. Would you please rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Councilor Garrison?
Present.
Councilor Bickford?
Yeah.
Councilor Ward?
Here.
Councilor Pesky?
Here.
Councilor La Rochelle?
Here.
Councilor Mason?
Here.
Councilor Lunt?
Here.
First item, please.
Is under the public hearing, Kelly Park Municipal Development and Tax Increment Financing District and Development Program.
Scott, and somebody give a slight presentation on that?
You used the word
I
slight.
used the word slight.
Would you like me to?
You want to retract it before we get started?
Just one set. That's too many sets.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that we.
Oh, it is
There you go.
already dimmed. Okay.
Yeah. Council, good evening. I'm just going to open my document here and we'll get started. Well, again, good evening, Council. We're here tonight to discuss the designation of, or to consider that designation of the, what we're calling the Kelly Park Municipal Development and Tax Increment Financing District. I will start with sort of a primer on what tax increment financing is and how it works. I think it's kind of an important grounding to our discussion. So tax increment financing is a public economic development financing program. It's funded by property taxes on the incremental new value generated by a development project. The key words are underlined. Public. It's your decision. It's a local decision. Incremental new value. That's construction that happens within a TIF district. The added value when that occurs is the incremental new value. Whoops. So how does it work? Through, again, local public process. Municipality designates a specific geographic area as a TIF district. The value of that property at that time is frozen at the time of the district establishment. We'll look a little more closely at this in a second. That's called the original assessed value. The TIF applies only to the new value in the district to be generated by private investment, and that's called the increased assessed value. So all or a portion of the increased assessed value generated by private investment in the district is quote-unquote captured. That's a term we use. And the taxes on the captured assessed value funds a municipally adopted development program by statute allowable up to 30 years. There's no minimum, but 30 years is the maximum. And again, local decision. So establishing a TIF district, we'll do this little cartoon here real quick. So how do we define the TIF district boundary? You know, there's a piece of property, okay? And let's say that's 2 acres. We set the original assessed value, so that's that piece of land before anybody builds on it, does anything to it. So there it is, 2 acres. Let's say, just so that I can keep up, it's $100 in value. So the taxes on that $100 will continue to go to the general fund, as it has all along, for the life of the district. Let's go to another page. So now this private investment occurs. There's our piece of property. Now somebody comes along and puts a building on it. Just for the sake of storytelling, let's say it's a 15,000 square foot light industrial building, say 25 to 30 employees. So now we calculate that increased assessed value. So there's our piece of property again, there's our building. And let's say now the value of this whole thing within the dotted red line is $500. So what does that mean? So $500 is the increased, or the 500 is the value now, minus the 100 in the original assessed value. Remember, we did the property before the building was worth 100, so that means $400 in increased assessed value. So all or some of that increased assessed value is captured to fund the municipal development program. So why is it used? Bolded there at the top. To stimulate private sector investment and job creation. And we've done this review before, we'll do it real quick. The town has effectively used this program in the past and has achieved its goals as a result. It's adopted 6 TIFs for this purpose since 1993. 163 jobs were retained, 250 to 275 were created. More than $38 million of investment was made. That includes, in some cases, personal property. More than $25 million in increased assessed value as of the most recent assessment date. So, point to this slide is, TIF has worked for Lisbon. So how can it be used? How can these revenues, and we talked about increased assessed value and all of that and capturing that, what can we use? That turns into dollars. So what can we use those dollars for? Well, we can use them for costs of improvements within the district. That's new construction, redevelopment, financing costs, professional services, administrative costs. Costs of improvements outside but related to the district. Think of this. A certain piece of property, you've got to bring sewer or water to it. It's not happening in the district, but it's related to the development of that district. That development can't happen there without that infrastructure. So you can use TIF funds to pay for that infrastructure. Municipality can do that. And then costs related to economic development, and this is a town-wide thing, so it's not constrained by within the district. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to the district. It's a town-wide thing. Economic development programs or events. For example, our Dingley TIF pays for the cost of economic development in Lisbon, and now has for nearly 2 years. You can establish revolving loan funds. You can set up skills development and training to prepare employees to work in an expanding company. You can even do child care programs, and in certain instances, you can do trail improvements. That's mainly for communities upstate that their economy really is driven by ATVs, snowmobiles, and that sort of thing. Secondary benefit to using TIF, and I'm going to have a caveat here, but we'll run through it real quick. So a secondary benefit to using TIF as a municipality is to shelter, quote unquote, against adjustments to state subsidies and county taxes based on the municipality's total evaluation, or evaluation, I should say. A municipality's total equalized assessed value as of April 1 every year is used to compute general purpose aid to education. That's a subsidy that we receive from the state. State revenue sharing in the news lately. That's a subsidy also from the state as we speak. And county taxes. And that's an expense. That's something we pay to our county government. Now my caveat is this. We all read the papers. The landscape could be changing. It certainly seems to be changing. To the extent it changes, we don't know yet. That'll be part of a political process in Augusta. So, you know, it could even mean the elimination for a period of time of revenue sharing. It's impossible for us to know that tonight. The only thing I can tell you is this secondary benefit is never a reason alone to use the TIF program to avoid these adjustments to your subsidies and taxes. But it, you know, as we stand today and as the law works today, this is all true. So for that purpose, we'll go on just a little bit. The state subsidies, as the slide says, it changes inversely to value. As total, and county taxes change directly. So as the total value increases, a municipality receives less in education and revenue sharing subsidies, an increase in the county tax obligations. So therefore, when you get new tax revenues from new development, there's a reduction because you experience these adjustments in your subsidies and your taxes. So sheltering as far as TIF works like this. Whenever you shelter value in a TIF district, you're able to shelter it away from the computation of those state subsidies and the county taxes. The sheltering allows the municipality to retain all or a portion of those new tax revenues that would have otherwise have gone to covering the cost of reduced subsidies or higher county taxes. Use of revenues captured and retained through TIF shelter is restricted. It must be used on economic development activities. So that's a little bit, one more slide. Let's just look at a development scenario. Let's say we add $2.5 million of new investment on a development site somewhere here in Lisbon. Based on our current tax rate and our tax assessment ratio, that would yield $46,000, a little bit, almost $46,200. But at the same time, because that value immediately goes to your state within 2 years, but there's a lag, as we've talked about many times, but it ultimately goes to your state valuation, equalized valuation, you see these reductions. So you'd see less, $19,000 less in education subsidy based on all of the current formulas. Reduction in municipal revenue sharing of $5,000, increase in county tax of $2,300. So your net on that $46,000 in annual taxes is $19,580. So that, I usually do a little back of the envelope calculation on this, and basically in Lisbon, as we stand today, we retain only 42 cents of every new unsheltered tax dollar as net new revenues. So, all right. So that's a little bit about TIF and a little bit about how it works. And now, again, we're here to consider the designation of the Kelly Park Municipal Development and Tax Increment Financing District. A little bit about Kelly Park. We all know a little something about this, I think, because it's been an interesting thing to watch out there on Route 196. A total of 48.96 acres. This is the former Dragon Pit site, as it was commonly known when I got here a couple of years ago. It's got great location, direct access to Route 196, one of the most heavily traveled east-west highways in the state. It's got a central location in the state and in the region, close to highways, both directions. It's got, Kelly Park has an approved commercial subdivision plan. There's been, as you all can see, substantial site work completed. The initial lots there at the front of the park are essentially shovel-ready and ready to build. There's infrastructure in the ground out there, sewer, water, et cetera. There's also direct access to natural gas. That's a huge plus in our favor, and high-speed telecommunications. And it's my opinion that this park presents an important opportunity for Lisbon. Now, I want to be clear with you. These are not the numbers of Scott Kelly, the site developer. These are my numbers, okay? Because if we're going to get involved in this kind of conversation, we have to have some sense of the kind of impact Kelly Park, or any park, when it's fully built out, can have on our municipality. So right now, so again, that caveat, my numbers, all right? These are speculative. There's no way with certainty to predict the future. But I need to give some sense to you folks and to myself what we're talking about here. So 4 large lots on the improved subdivision plan. That acreage, I mean, some of those lots are huge. The acreage could yield, in my view, as many as 6 to 8 lots, depending on the demand that we see going forward. Now, again, based on the kind of scope we expect in terms of development projects, we're talking about higher end uses and higher end employment here. That's what we're envisioning, and that's what we're trying to tailor a program to encourage. So we assume $2.5 million in real property value per lot. Again, just to do that back of the envelope calculations, get a sense of where we are. If you did that, and that was accomplished, 2.5 million in real property value per lot, 8 lots, that's $20 million in new commercial value. And this may, in some circles, be argued as a conservative estimate, okay? But let's stay with conservative. But we could be talking in excess of 20 million in new commercial value. 8 companies, let's say 8 lots get sold, 8 companies site there. Let's say they have an average of 25 employees each. Now, there's ways to get at these kind of numbers. You can look at industry standards of how many people would be in an office building of a certain size versus a manufacturing facility versus a warehouse, let's say. But let's just, you know, so it's fair to say that if it was an intense office use, we could be talking 50, 60 people in a given business. But let's just use 25, okay? 8 lots, 25 employees each, 160 jobs in that park. That's 9% of what you have in the whole town right now. So basically, a 10% increase in employment. So new commercial value, added employment, and a second, I would argue, a secondary benefit to the local businesses and economy. If there's more people here, more people with good jobs, then the gas stations, the grocery stores, the convenience stores, the restaurants will undoubtedly see some increase in business because there's simply more people here with money in their pocket. There's challenges. Even still, with all this going for us, we just talked about on that last slide, there's challenges. There's our national and our regional and state economy. There's fewer projects happening. When the economy's down, there's fewer projects than would be happening in a more robust environment. So we got to be stronger. We got to stand out more. If we're going to capture any of these projects, we got to put ourselves in a stronger competitive position than we're in today. The additional investment is also needed at the park. As you can tell, there's still more work to be done. There's been so much accomplished and so much invested, but there's still more work to be done in order for that park to reach its full potential. And then perception of Lisbon as a business location, frankly, is a challenge. I want to think about it for a minute. We've got a centralized location in the state and in the region. We've got quick access to highways. We get access to an extremely large employment base. Again, conservative estimate. If you take the Bath Brunswick Topsom labor market, just a few minutes away, LA, just a few minutes away, us included, that's 90,000 people. And you start to go in the other direction, and that number even grows even more. There's a lot of potential employees with a lot of different skills close by. We also, again, natural gas. We have other infrastructure. I mean, we're pretty developed along our main business corridor when it comes to infrastructure. Yet, the perception in the development community of Lisbon as a location is poor. And this is something we've heard again and again. As I try to do my work, other folks who have an interest in growing this economy, it's a reality for us. And I would attribute that primarily, from what I've been told, the blighted areas on the corridor raise concerns on the part of folks with money that are looking for places to invest it. It leaves them with an impression that the town's not going forward, it's going backward. And the development environment, all of those, the blighted situation aside, they're not quite sure where Lisbon is in terms of being committed to development and being aggressive about it. So we need to try to change that. I think we can all agree, we want to see more investment in town. We want to see more jobs. And so how are we going to change that? Do we change it by doing nothing? I'd suggest no. Well, there we go. Thank you. Good night. Now I'm going to have to talk without it. I apologize for that. I'm not sure what happened. So we've got a TIF proposal in front of you. What was that?
You lost your connection by the looks.
Oh, the internet went out?
Well, there was no internet. I was just going straight to,
Your hard drive?
it's telling me I need to, all right, maybe we can go back to it.
There you go.
Thank you for your patience. So, we talked, I'm going to go back to this for a second. We've got these challenges we just talked about. So, we've got a program here in place and ready for your consideration that we think will address some of these issues. We think this program can make Lisbon more competitive for statewide and regional projects. It'll get us in the game when we're not in it right now. We think it can provide financial support needed to realize the park's full potential. And as, or more importantly, it sends a clear message of positive change in Lisbon to the development community with an aggressive incentive plan in place for the park, with a predictable, consistent, and fair process. This will help us change that image and craft a new image of an attractive, advantageous place to do business. And again, predictability, consistency. So this proposed district could be the entire 48.96 acres of the park. That's our map, U21 Lot 6, for those of you who'd like to look that up. The original assessed value as of 3/31/12, so that's the last day of 11/12 tax year. The value of the property at that point was $224,980. This development program, which is included in your paperwork for this evening, proposes a 30-year TIF district term. And our intention is to capture 60% of the increased assessed value from the park each year to fund the development program that we'll describe here. This is what we call in the trades, I guess, an omnibus TIF. So it's from one many. It enables as proposed, would enable individual credit enhancement agreements with developers of the lots in the park. Up to 60% of the increased assessed value that is captured and results from development on each lot is available to financially support that project. And again, going back to, the kind of things you can pay for with TIF, it's construction costs, machinery and equipment, debt reduction frequently when it is developers who share in these revenues. The extent of the TIF revenues available to support each project will be determined by criteria developed by the town, also included in the development program. Project value and employment are key. Here's a little bit about that. We're looking for particular industries, and those can be described very generally as construction, manufacturing, and then technical/service-based. And that can include information technology, finance and insurance companies, professional and technical services like architects or engineers, educational services, healthcare, and other services, frankly, except obviously for public administration. So we're not looking to create a retail outlet here. We're looking to put high-value buildings with high-value jobs inside of them. This criteria will also be based on estimated construction costs. We're looking, basically, we've got a set of criteria. Just an example on the construction costs, it could range anywhere from $500,000 on a project to $2 million and above. And we've got these kind of things slotted in certain steps and points awarded. The more value there is, the higher points awarded, the greater the reimbursement allowed by the credit enhancement agreement. Total number of jobs. Companies that create 5 or 10 certainly would be eligible, but would not be eligible for the kind of reimbursement that a company that created 50 or brought 50 to the park or above that. Obviously, those would score much higher. Average weekly wage. Just a little bit about this. We're in the Lewiston-Auburn labor market area. For 2011, most recent completed calendar year, where data is available, The average weekly wage in the Lewiston-Auburn labor market area, this is all industries from soup to nuts, all included, is $691 a week. Lisbon, at this present time, same time frame, for all those same sort of jobs, but if they're in Lisbon, the average weekly wage is $543 a week. That's only 79% of the labor market area total. What we're trying to do is create employment by volume, how many people we can get employed, but we're also trying to create higher value jobs that pay better. And so we have, if you can improve our situation even a little bit, yeah, you'll potentially be eligible. If you can improve it and get us up by where the rest of the labor market is, you'll be in line for a higher reimbursement. And so all of those things will be scored, and we do have a scale established, and that'll determine the eligibility for reimbursement. That works in a couple of different angles. It works for the town because it gives you a path. It reminds you what's important to you. You're not given to individual negotiations. You've got a real guide there which reminds you the value in creating those jobs and that investment. That's what we're looking for. For the development community, they're able to look at this and say, well, this is the kind of credit enhancement agreement I might be eligible for my project. I know I'm going to create 40 jobs. I know they're going to pay, $625 a week on average. I know that my building's going to be worth $2 million. That lines me up for a reimbursement there that's attractive to me. So that works both ways. It works for the town, it works for the development community. Now, there will be an initial credit enhancement agreement, the first of those 8 or so that we just talked about. And that will be with Premier Development, LLC, which is the park developer. This would be directed to support the future development of a park lot for an expanded Enterprise Trenchless Technologies Incorporated, ETTI. The parameters of this agreement would be 60% of the increased assessed value, or to put it another way, it's 100% of the captured assessed value. Remember, we talked about that. We're going to first capture a percentage of increased assessed value. That's our captured assessed value, and what we're suggesting is 100% on that, reimbursed annually for 20 years to support this development. And this agreement is based on a couple of different things. On the significant investment to date by Premier Development and its principal, Scott Kelly, to create this environment and to create this opportunity, which not only benefits him, benefits the community. And this agreement would be also and largely driven by the anticipated investment in job retention and creation for an expanded ETTI. Frankly, folks, if there wasn't a place to go in Lisbon for this great growing company, we might lose them to Topsom, Lewiston, you name it. So creating that environment and giving us an opportunity to keep one of our stronger growing companies is the rationale behind that initial credit enhancement agreement. And what's important to remember about this is that the document, the credit enhancement agreement, a draft of which is included in your development program, will be triggered. There'll be a triggering event. In other words, when a lot is chosen and value is created on that lot, that's when that agreement goes into effect. It does not go into effect tomorrow or at such time it's executed. It goes into effect at the time that there's actual value, taxable value created in the ground on one of those lots. So, to go on, the proposed development program would also authorize TIF revenues to be spent on 2 municipal economic and community development activities. First would be simply to reimburse the town for legal costs associated with credit enhancement agreements. Again, those are legal contracts. It's in our best interest, and it is standard practice that these are handled by attorneys So clearly, our corporate counsel would have an involvement in putting these documents together when they're created, so there's going to be a cost to that. We can recoup some TIF revenues to reimburse us for those costs. Further, the development program would also enable an economic development marketing program to be put in place. And we've talked about in the past the need for that. Important point here, that's only funded if there are surplus funds from sub 60% credit enhancement. As we talked about, we've got a grading scale. It's possible some people may not, their development on that lot may not rise to the level we want, and therefore there's no deal. Or it may be more modest when compared with another one. What we're doing tonight is putting the pieces in place to capture 60% assessed value each year. In some cases, depending on how each lot develops, we might not use all of those funds. So then we have these two municipal activities in which those funds could be used if the development program is approved tonight and also signed off on by the state. But that's only at your discretion during your annual budgeting process. Let's, because again, I think we have to get a sense of what we're talking about when we have these conversations. Let's look at sort of what I call financial scope here. Let's look at a single lot in a single year, okay? Let's just say, go back to our back of the envelope number, 2.5 million in assessed value on a given lot in that district. At our current tax rate, at our current assessment ratio, that returns about $46,170 in taxes. Now, under this TIF program that we're proposing tonight, 60% of that would be put aside and returned to the developer of that lot. And again, we're preparing for sort of greatest case scenario, so we're preparing at 60% here. So the total TIF revenues directed to the developer CEA at 60% would be $27,700. The other 40% that originates from this increased assessed value is $18,476. That goes to your general fund. Now we talked, and I'll only touch on this briefly, but we did talk earlier about the tax shift phenomenon. In this case, capturing 60, sheltering it, that saves you basically $15,900, almost $16,000 in potential lost subsidies and increased county taxes. Let's look at, let's say this whole park built out at our projected 8 lot, 2.5 each, full build up. And let's say that's year 9, anticipating maybe a lot a year gets sold and developed. So by year 9, project's built out, $20 million in increased assessed value. Taxes on that at the 83% assessment ratio is $369,000. Under a 60% credit enhancement agreement, that would refund to all 8 of those, not any one developer, but all 8 of them at once, $221,000 of that $369,000, which directs then $147,807 to the town's general fund. And looking at the shelter benefit there, you save, in that case, by sheltering that 60%, you save about $127,000, because that $20 million, otherwise, all of it would go to your equalized state valuation eventually, and that would put you in the negative in some of these subsidies. So, lastly, important considerations. TIF is performance-based. If you do not perform, you do not share in the revenue. If you don't build the building, if you don't create jobs, you don't get any money. What you're doing tonight is putting a program in place that allows that to happen, but it does not commit you to anything until there is performance. No commitment for the town without investment occurring first, and investment that meets your goal. This is a broad program and envisions a maximum scenario like I just referenced. 60%, all the way down 30 years. The reality is, if you're looking at phased credit enhancement agreements, the lot's developed in a phased manner, you enter into credit enhancement agreements, some of them might be 20, some of them might be 10. Depends on what presents us at that time. So this is a broad program and envisions the full 60, full 20 years for each individual lot there. But keep in mind, TIFs are amendable. I don't know if that's a word, but I just made it up. TIFs are amendable. By nature, this TIF is speculative. We're not dealing with a specific project right at this time on some of those new lots. But, so we have to use sort of the speculative approach, like all of these numbers have been, and like this development scenario that we've painted. But to remember that as development occurs, we can revisit this TIF if we so desire, and tailor it more specifically to what actually happens on the ground as this thing starts to build out. So, you know, what we're doing is putting a structure in place. If we were to move forward on this tonight, we're putting a structure in place, but you have the ability, and you always have the ability, to redefine that as you move along to meet your needs and your goals. So that's what I got. And so thank you for your patience. It's obviously a very complicated thing, and so we want to have good grounding for conversation.
I'd open up the podium for anybody that had any input, for the public input with this.
You want me to go first? Larry Fillmore from Lisbon. First of all, Scott, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you. Okay, and I went over the documents that were put out on the internet, on the town website. And that also was an excellent job. One of the best ones I've seen. Okay? I'm not real happy with the 60%. I think in this economy that we have right now and our financial line that we're in, I think 60 is a little bit too high for us to handle. It would be nice, I think it's the right thing, if our economy was where we could afford that luxury, but with revenue sharing being questionable and the budgets the way they are right now, with the tax increase we had last year and really looking good for this year too, that I think it's a little aggressive. I thank Scott for the part. I think that's a great idea. I think it's a wonderful thing. The other comment that I have has to do with the credit enhancement agreement. When the state of Maine initially introduced this program, they had a provision in there that required the state to monitor where that 60% increased assessed value went and what it was used for, okay? That was to ensure that the money was not going in somebody's pocket, but was actually being utilized to enhance the program, the business or whatever. Well, when they put that in there, they didn't figure out, they didn't allow any money to go with that. So they couldn't finance it. So then it fell back on the municipalities to do. Well, it's not written anywhere. And there's nobody in the communities that are monitoring that money, the taxpayers' money that's going back to the businesses. Now, I'm not saying it has to be a full-blown report yearly or whatever. But there has to be some provisions written into the credit enhancement agreement that allows for the taxpayers' money to be ensured that it's being utilized properly and not either going into the business profits or into somebody's pocket. The way that you handle that, I don't know, but it has to be done in order to protect the taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Scott Kelly with Premier Development. I think most are probably aware of the project, but I guess I want to step back and update a little bit. When we first, I've been a resident of this community or been involved here. I lived here for 33 years and have had a business and been involved here in the town for almost 42. And it's a place that we call home and a place that we wanted to expand business and offer opportunities to people that lived in this area. And when we originally looked at this this business park back in '09 is when I really went out in search. Some people have been a little confused that we've got a building that's brand new, that's 24,000 square feet in the Lisbon Industrial Park, and want to know why we're prepared to move. And the short answer to that is because we've outgrown it. There was land available next door, which some people might be aware, where there was a lot. There was only 2 when we bought that facility in the industrial park. And since has been acquired shortly after we bought the first lot by Main Recycling. When we went out into this project and built out, it really was a down the road, which we shared with Scott. It was, to me, it was further down the road than what we anticipated. And I've shared with him that we signed a 7-year contract with a gas company, and those of you that picked up the newspaper understand that natural gas is, no pun intended, is a booming thing lately. And it's grown our business from 3 or 4 or 5 to 20 to 30 this year, and we expect to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 employees by the end of probably March. With expanded through the 7-year contract, it's guaranteed work for us. We expect to be somewhere in the 75 to 80 range, possibly by the end of 14. And I think it's good to point out that the folks that we hire, a lot of local people, and our average range of pay for the year is somewhere in the 50 to 55,000 range, which exceeds, I think, the numbers to a fair value of what he recommended was in Lewiston. The reality is I've done my homework with talking to developers around the area and what is going to bring a high-end business to Lisbon. I've been approached by several folks that want to put businesses in that park, and it didn't fit Scott Kelly's, not necessarily the town's. I think I understand what the town is looking for, but it didn't meet my criteria. So we turned those away. And I think if we're going to bring, we're going to bring business to Lisbon, one of the great things we do have is natural gas, which wasn't my great planning. It just happened to be luck that it's there. But one of the things we do is we do need to incentivize, and I think that 60% is an important component to getting people to decide whether they want to go into the Mid-Coast Regional Development, the old Navy base, or they want to continue and look at a place in Lewiston or Auburn. So I think it's going to be important that we get a facility in there that kind of outlines what this park is going to look like, which is why we spent the investment that we did to make the entrance. We wanted to showcase what this place potentially will look like when it's finished. So I think all of what Scott said, I couldn't agree more. I think that's what it's going to take to get that park built out. None of us are looking for a 20-year build out. You want to capture that value as quick as you can. So I'm not sure if I've answered or gone in the right direction, but that's a full scope. So thank you.
Any other input for the public hearing part of it?
Ross Cunningham, Lisbon Falls. For those of you who weren't there last, I think it was early December, Positive Change Lisbon had a board of developers, some guest speakers come to the community school. And we asked them right up front, hey, why are you not coming to Lisbon? What's wrong with Lisbon? And Scott Benson referred to some of that, some of the blight, some of the Lisbon's a rundown mill town. It's just a reputation. I think Scott pointed out pretty well that when you have a list of towns and you're a developer and you're looking at this list of towns, Lisbon isn't even on it. I think, in my opinion, this is a great project. I think it really takes a stand and says, hey, we're ready to welcome business to town in Lisbon. I think it's a great thing to go forward with. I'm not great on numbers. I don't understand the 60-40 thing. Okay, whatever. But if you can put an invitation out there that puts us above other communities like the MRA and things like that to get them in here, I think I'm all for it. Thank you.
Ross. Any other input?
I'm Bill Van Tynen. I'm your tax assessor. There's a few of you on the council I haven't met yet. Good to meet you. I'm not here as your assessor. I'm here to speak a little bit about TIFs as an individual, and tell you a little bit of a story. When I'm not a tax assessor, I'm a part-time farmer. Last week, I went to the agricultural trade show in Augusta. A business called Backyard Farms, which happens to be located in Madison, was there. And I met a fellow about 36, 37 years old, who many years ago was on my Little League team. And he was glad to see me, and I was glad to see him. And I said, how long you been at Backyard Farms? And he said, about 6 months. I said, how do you like it? I like it a lot. He was happy as could be. He's working in the town he grew up in. He lives in the adjacent town. He's very, very pleased. I live in an area where there's been a lot of job losses. Shoe shops used to be around, they're gone. With one big exception, New Balance. Used to be a lot of woodworking businesses around. They're largely gone. This is a story of two TIFs that worked hand in hand. Several years ago, we did a TIF with Madison Paper. With the money that we secured from that TIF from Madison Paper, we helped to develop a business park. We didn't have a private investor doing a business park. We did it ourselves as a town because that's the only way we could get it done. We built the business park. We advertised the business park. We promoted the town of Madison as a business location. We had this group of people come who said, we like your business park. It's not big enough. It's not level enough. It's a nice park, but it won't do things for us. Do you have any other land that we might be able to buy? We showed them some parcels. They came to the town. We negotiated a TIF with that company, which eventually became Backyard Farms. They've built 40 acres under a greenhouse roof. They've employed 200 people, one of which I met a week ago. That's why you want to do a TIF. You don't get anything done without taking some risk. There's not a lot of risk with a TIF. It's performance-based. You're not on the hook for anything. If somebody builds something, you're going to refund part of the taxes to them, and hopefully you're going to meet somebody you coached in Little League who's got a job at one of those businesses. Thank you.
Any other input on the public hearing part? Seeing none, we'll close that public hearing. Next item, Twyla.
Is audience participation. At this time, those in the audience who wish to address the council may come forward.
Audience participation.
I see where the planning board has changed the definition of home occupation in a futile attempt to justify the operation of two garages operating on Route 9. There's been a big history. We've been back and forth. There's been 6 months on this, so we don't need to go into any other details other than the town's code enforcement office recognized these garages as being in violation of our ordinances and issued them letters telling them to cease. These letters were ignored both by the owners and by the town. The town didn't even support the code enforcement officer. Now, the planning board is trying to circumvent the comprehensive plan, which is the wishes and the vision of the people. The comprehensive plan says in the corridor for Route 9, and I'm taking this off the top of my head, that it can either be used for recreational or natural resource. Garages don't fit into either one of those two definitions. No way can you stretch it. So by that in itself, this is going to be what I consider an illegal act. I know you're going to vote it in, I know that. So I'm wasting my breath. But it is known that that we are bending rules. The two operations that's going on that I just spoke about, neither one of them pay personal property tax in the town of Lisbon. Isn't that amazing? Other garages do. Roger Bigford's garage does. But these don't. We're going to have an awful hard year with the budget, trying to make it come out and balance where we don't have to raise taxes. But I'm going to tell you, one of the things that you need to look at really seriously is look at the businesses that are currently in Lisbon, that are currently in operation, that are not paying personal property tax, and ask why the rest of us are having to pick up the slack for these people. If they have a business and they have personal property within that business, they need to be paying their fair share of taxes. And that tax money we're going to need this year to balance our budget. So I think we need to start looking at some of these people seriously instead of trying to circumvent the system. Thank you.
Any other audience participation? Seeing none, we'll move on. Next item, please.
Audience participation response.
I have none from the week before, but just to respond back to Fillmore, I mean, you are valued, have the opportunity for your opinion, but a lot of what you stated, the facts are just not true. So I just want to make sure people are aware of that. There are items in this town that the planning board does work hard. This actually change does affect a lot more than just Route 9. And it surely is not just in the eyes of us trying to correct a wrong. It is us trying to fix what some of the things need to be corrected in town. So again, we value your opinion, but some of your facts are just not correct. Thank you. Next item, please.
Is under the consent agenda. Any counselor wishing to remove any item may do so now. Order 2013-8 to approve the minutes of January 15, 2013.
So moved. I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Pass 7-0.
Next item, please.
Is under council orders, resolutions, and ordinances. Order 2013-9. Kelly Park Municipal Development and Tax Increment Financing District and Development Program.
This item here we will be voting on it. There's a lot of good factors that come along with this. As a town, we really need to look to see where we're going and where we're not going. And as Bill mentioned, I mean, unfortunately, you can actually sit back and kind of look around and try to wait for stuff to happen, or you can actually try to promote and work with people in town to try to get it moving quickly. This is a very unique TIF. Scott, with along with his people he work with, put this together. It is a great opportunity. If you're in the business world and if you look at the environment around us in Lawson, Auburn, and Topsom, it is very easy to find a shovel-ready project you can put a business in. This TIF, as for a business looking to expand or grow, gives them a little security coming into it that they can actually do the initial finances, initial numbers, with a guarantee the TIF will be in place, and not only just a guarantee a TIF will be in place, but knowing what they have for initial investment going in, they can know what that TIF will be before they start the process, not a quarter way into it. I think it's a great opportunity. It's going to set Lisbon apart from the people around us that we're competing with. So to me, it's a win-win. I got to tell you, I mean, when I first got on the council, I was not a very big fan of TIFs. I consider them a gift, not a TIF. But as you get more educated and learn the process, you find out that that's what actually makes towns and municipalities grow, and that's a tool that we have. And I'm just kind of pleasured that we have this one, and it's come this far, and we can actually move it forward, hopefully tonight. So with that, I would actually entertain a motion to, if there's any other discussion from council, I could hear that now. If not, I'd entertain a motion to move it forward.
May I ask a question of Scott, just to clarify? Mr. Fillmore brought up the fact that he thought that 60% was high. But Scott, I understood that 60% was the maximum, is that right?
That would be the maximum that
Okay.
that the development program, as we've written it, and as you'll consider it tonight, that
Okay.
60 would be the maximum. It could be 50, it could be 40, it could even be less than that, depending on the value that gets created, the jobs that get created, what they get, what they pay.
That
And
sort
so-
of grading chart that.
Right, that we've
okay.
talked about, right. And so, yes, maximum 60, but there's certainly, some play in there as well, depending on the extent of the project.
And also with that, just to add, and Scott can verify this, this 60% does fall within the guidelines that was put forth prior to us, any of us being on the council. Those guidelines are the TIF ordinance that we have, so the numbers,
And it's,
Yeah.
yes, Mr. Chairman, it's consistent with the tips that I talked about earlier that the town has done successfully over the years. The percentage of reimbursement at the maximum 60% level is entirely consistent with what's been done over almost now 20 years. Actually, now it is 20 years.
don't go away.
And Scott, that is fluid, right? If somebody comes in with, 50-plus employees, meets all the hoops for 60% and then falls off, cuts their employees by half.
Exactly.
Also-
And Larry actually, his point regarding the state's previous sort of reporting requirements at one time when this, back when I was but a young man in this business, and the state enacted this legislation. They did envision that there would be, some pretty consistent and even arguably strenuous reporting requirements. But as Larry has pointed out, that's kind of fallen off the wayside. I would say that in your credit enhancement agreements, as they get negotiated, it would be my recommendation that we include language, and then again, that's a lawyer thing, that's not a me thing, but we include language which says, here's what happens if you don't meet the thresholds of what you laid out for us. If you indicate you're going to create or bring 50 jobs to Lisbon and you bring 10, we've got to have a way to redefine the parameters of that agreement. So, that's, in my view, the CEA, the Credit Enhancement Agreement, is the vehicle to give the town protection, because that's really what that document does. It lays out the parameters of the deal, and then it talks about what recourse both sides have if there's any dispute at any point in time. And so, in my view, that we can handle that with a credit enhancement agreement. We don't want to leave a big wide door for people to drive through, tell us, we're going to create 100 jobs, don't worry about it, give us the 60%, and then it doesn't work out that way. That's a problem for us. And so I think the credit enhancement agreements will include language that will give us an opportunity, if those thresholds aren't met, to do something about it.
And the council actually did have a full night of workshop with Scott on this, and we went over these items of what if and how it should be written. So we do feel very comfortably that Scott does have a pretty good handle on how to direct the town when it comes to writing those agreements. Any other discussion from council? All set? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
And Scott?
Thank you guys very much for your time.
And investment, exactly. Next item, please.
Order 2013-10, the Boston Post-Kane Award to the oldest citizen.
Twyla will address this.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we had placed some advertisements in the newspaper, and we have been looking for several months for the oldest resident in the town of Lisbon. It has come to our attention that Stella Carville is 99 years old, turned 99 in January this month. She and her husband, Lester, have lived here over 86 years, I guess. Lester is long gone. He passed away, but Stella's still here. and lives on Grandview Street. I just wanted to recognize her as being our oldest citizen in Lisbon. And with your permission, we would like to present her a plaque in the honor of the Boston Post cane.
And we need to vote on that, correct? Entertain a motion to actually move that forward.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Order passed 7-0.
Thank you, Twyla, for your hard work on that.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Order 2013-11, home occupation ordinance, first reading, roll call vote required.
As you all had an opportunity to look over the ordinance, this is just the first reading of it, so, and we're going to vote to actually move it forward. What will happen next is we'll have a public hearing and allow the input from the public, and then we'll have a second reading, and then we'll actually make the final vote. So tonight is just for us to move it forward, where we'd entertain a motion and have us vote as council to move it forward to a public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
This would be a roll call vote.
Yes. Thank you, Twyla. Sorry about that.
Counselor Lunt?
Yes.
Counselor Mason?
Yes.
Counselor LaRochelle?
Yes.
Counselor Pesky?
Yes.
Counselor Ward?
Yes.
Counselor Bickford?
Yes.
And Counselor Garrison? 7 yeas, 0 nays, order passed.
Next item, please.
Order 2013-12, the Finance Committee Ordinance Amendment. This is a first reading and will require a roll
I'll
call vote.
address that. This is just some language changes in the ordinance that was passed this fall. It's a substantive change is that you're adding 2 alternates to this group, and that's about really it. And changing, there is one change in the 4th paragraph, where it's in italics. We have 4 times per year on the second Tuesday. That should be 4 times a year on the second Monday. Some of the people met tonight who put their names in the hat for this position, and those, they all agreed that Monday nights would be the time that they could get together if they were going to be on the committee. So that's the only substantive change.
And again, what we're adding, some of us were able to attend the meeting earlier. It was a very good group. I think it's actually very beneficial to the town and to the school and to the council as we move forward making our decisions on the budget. This alternates will allow 2 other people to actually serve in this committee. And with the people that we have, it will actually, I think, benefit them because there will be a lot of input that will be coming from this group. So seeing that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Okay, and this will be roll call.
Yes. Counselor Lunt?
Yes.
Counselor Garrison?
Yes.
Counselor Bickford?
Yes.
Counselor Mason?
Yes.
Counselor LaRochelle?
Yes.
Counselor Pesky?
Yes.
Counselor Ward?
Yes.
7 yeas, 0 nays, order passed.
Next item, please.
Under other business, Planning Board Capital Improvement Plan recommendation.
This was the capital improvement plan that we presented to you in December as required by charter. The planning board must review that capital improvement plan to make sure it is in compliance with our comprehensive plan. They have spent several meetings and workshops on this, reviewing it. I've been to one of them to confirm some of the questions they had, and they have found it to be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. So your next step, you don't have to vote on this, you just have to, you'll have a public hearing, your first meeting of February, to adopt the plan, which does not mean it will get funded. It just means that you agree that these are things that we need to do. Whether it gets funded or not is decided in the budget process.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Next item, please.
Is the Finance Director's report.
And Jessica, you're on.
Hello. So before you, you have my finance report for the month of December. To summarize revenues for you, December brought in just over $260,000. This is primarily due to excise tax collection at $60,000 and state revenue sharing at $55,000, as well as a Betty reimbursement payment of $118,000. Excise tax is just over 48% collected, and this is right in line with where we were last year at this time. I expect us to meet our budget for the end of this fiscal year with excise tax. State revenue sharing is at 48%, which is slightly below last year, where we were at 51% collected. But we were on a budget of $830,000 last year versus $820 this year. So not only are we budgeting $10,000 less, we're not receiving all that we have budgeted. So it's kind of a double hit in comparison to last year. You know, we were honored more money last year, less this year. We collected more last year. We're not collecting as much this year. And that's really all I have for revenues for you, unless you have questions for me.
Any questions from council? Still early. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Moving on to the expenses. Total expenditures for the month of December were $464,057. Of this, 61%, or $282,000, was related to personnel services, including wages and benefits. Contractual services made up approximately 13% at $61,000. This is primarily due to our revaluation services of $19,000, waste disposal fees of $21,000. We had legal fees of $2,000, and town building expenses of $14,000, which, as always, is where we pay for our water, natural gas, electricity, and telephone. Repairs and maintenance and supplies made up approximately $13,000 at 13% at $64,000. And this was primarily due to fuel purchases. We had a generator rental and service fees during the month, and we also had some ladder testing done. Capital purchases made up 10% of total expenditures at $46,000. This was primarily due to work done with MTM siding. Over at E.T. Smith, they had roof work done. We had computer upgrades, as well as a repeater antenna installed and hose purchases for the fire department. And that's primarily what I have for expenses, unless you have questions for me.
Any questions from council?
Sorry, Jessica, I do
Not
have
at
two
all.
questions for you. Under insurance, what does our contractual services cover? The reason I ask is I noticed that in November, we were at 78.28% expended, and now we're at 68.52.
Yep, the 5200 series under insurances is our general liability insurance, as well as our public official liability, police liability. It's our general liability insurance. And the reason why you saw the change is because every year they evaluate our insurance level, and we usually receive a rebate for due diligence, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Did this year.
And we did this year, to the tune of $7,200.
Great.
So,
And then my last one would be under technology. I was wondering what we purchased for our capital. I noticed that was quite a jump from last month.
yep, we, that 7,000 is, I'm assuming is what you're looking
Yep,
at.
yep.
For the month, we expended 7,000, and actually, because I did look at that, upon reviewing it, about 3,000 of that will actually be shifted to contracted services because it related to our contract with SimQuest for our IT services. The remainder of that 4,000 primarily related to a network upgrade with the police department. So,
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for council? Seeing none?
Okay, and as always, on a side note, December 31st, we've collected 50%, or $5 million, of our total tax commitment. This is slightly below, if not right in line with last year at this time. We were, I think last year it was like 50.87%. This year we're 50.13%, so close.
It's working, right?
Yeah. All right, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Town managers report.
Just a couple of things. If people are wondering where our sidewalk flower is, we had a transmission go, and we've just subcontracted with ETTI at a very reasonable rate to do that. The transmission was due in this week, and we'll have, hopefully we don't have any snow right away, but if we do, we'll be prepared. The Governor LePage's initiatives, we sat down with the department heads last week and are preparing alternative thoughts with a Plan B budget. If any of that comes to fruition, it'll be a very difficult process, even more so if we have to look for $1 million in revenue. Public Works, as of the first Monday in February, you can reach the Public Works Department at 353-3000, extension 117. That's where, instead of being answered up at the Public Works building, general calls will be answered down here in this building. So it's a shift a little bit in some things we're trying to do. Also, if you haven't had a chance to get over to the police department, and maybe if you want to get in to see the dispatch center, make arrangements with the chief. It's pretty impressive with all the new technology. And all of our equipment is in for Durham, Sabatis, and Green, and you should be up and running, but Dell has had some issues with the server, and they can't seem to quite figure it out yet, but we were guaranteed we'd have it up and running by Thursday. It still works, but they can't seem to see the extra hard drives. Little I understand about it, but Dell was actually in the building today, working with Simtex, our IT people, trying to figure it out. Of course, it has to happen to us, not. But otherwise, that's been a fairly smooth transition, and hopefully it'll be done soon. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Any questions?
The repeater, is that a replacement or a new?
It's a new one.
That's to cover the expanded services?
It's an improvement on our services, plus the expanded services. It's in a higher point. We had been looking to put a building up. We had received some grant money for some of that equipment, and we didn't want to pay $50,000 for a piece of land to put a building on that's, 10 by 10. So we put it there for the time being, and we're waiting for the water department to have their new standpipe put in somewhere in that area, and then we'll put it on that. So that's what it is. Yep.
How's that? Moving forward. Next item, please.
Under appointments, Order 2013-13, 2 regular Finance Committee members, terms expiring June 30th, 2016.
If I make a recommendation from council to actually go into executive session to actually go over the applications, so we could come back and actually make the appointments. So at this point, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session on this item.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? We'll be going in just in the back room. This shouldn't take us very long at all. All right.
Then you'll come back out and do the next
Yes.
executive session after. Okay.
parka and a pair of
I didn't go
shorts.
until my kids were older. They
And sneakers, yeah, and he's not like,
twice and then-
so what are you doing after?
See, I like that.
traffic
part.
accident.
So why are you out here? I'd like to go again, though.
Yeah. I've never been.
You don't
Never
think
been
my
to the
patrolman
animal
can
kingdom.
handle
That
it?
wasn't open when we went.
My parents
Okay,
we
we
sold
didn't lose it, right?
before we go to Disney World, and of course we sold it,
he was out
and, you know,
there.
oops,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
can't afford it.
Yeah.
We were off to
Piss him
college,
off,
you
though,
know.
I'll tell you that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's taken us 6 years to sell the house.
No, even when you're
Hey,
an
Twyla,
adult,
we're-
you're riding on.
Oh, yeah.
I
Especially
had
if you have
been.
kids to
Recording
go with, you can
again.
kind of watch it
Okay,
through their
why
eyes.
don't you actually, we'll go back to the appointments, if you could actually bring that back up.
Order 2013, 2 regular Finance Committee members terms expiring June 30th, 2016.
We are going to do this in one.
Oh, okay.
one-
Then
If
you
you
would
could
need
actually, yep.
2 regular Finance Committee members, terms expiring 2015, and 1 regular Finance Committee member, term expiring June 30th, 2014.
Entertain a motion?
I move that we accept to the Finance Committee for a 3-year term, Mr. Smith and Mrs. Wells, for 2-year terms, Ms. Morgan Alexander and Mr. Regulis, and for a 1-year term, Mr. Fellows.
I will second that.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0. Order 2013-16, 1 council member for the revolving loan fund committee.
We have always historically had the counselors sit on that committee. At the first time was Dale, and then Dale decided to become a state representative, and Mike Bowie sat in on it. And of course, he's not here, so we need somebody from the council to volunteer to sit on the revolving loan fund. It's important because if we think we have an application coming up for a local business to borrow, so we need somebody in place.
And that actually usually happens throughout the course of the day. during
Yeah,
the
we
week.
try to do it late afternoon, or because there's a lot of business people. There's George Roy sits on that committee, Brenda Rogers sits on that committee, Jessica and I sit on the committee, and Scott acts, I think, as an ex officio. He doesn't vote, and then 1 counselor.
Is it like at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock?
It's between 4 and 5 usually.
Does anybody of the council have an interest?
I'll do it.
Mark, go for it.
Is there any other interest? I mean, we don't want to
I can
actually
make
just,
afternoons.
I'm on so many committees now.
yeah.
It's basically a review of a lengthy application process. It's all confidential, and Scott walks you through it. And it's great to have a banker, George Roy, on it, because he's looked at applications his whole life, and he generally knows the parties, so.
One benefit of the council is we get to look at all the information too, so,
Yeah.
after. So, I mean, it won't be something you would be missing. It would be just the idea of, dedicating the time to actually go through the initial part of the process, and then we actually follow up with all the other information.
I had a couple years of business training up at Orono, so
Yeah.
I'm able to read this kind of stuff, so I do know what it is about.
Good.
Okay, is there something we actually need
You
to
have to
vote on?
vote to
We do have
appoint
to
him.
vote it. So, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we ask Mr. Lunt to serve on that committee.
And I will second that.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Next item, please.
Councilor Communications.
Anybody have anything they would like to add to this evening?
I have one. Just a reminder that we have a time before our meetings that some of us, or maybe all of us counselors, are here. And usually it's about a half an hour before, and the public is welcome to come and just talk to us, ask questions about things happening in the future, maybe some budget questions. We may not be able to answer you every question you ask us, but we're here, and we're going to be trying that out for a few months and see how it goes. So haven't had any takers yet, but we've been here, and if folks would like to come, you're more than welcome to come, and you can leave before the meeting if you'd like, or you can stay for the meeting. So just be aware of that, and it is a time to speak to us.
I'd like to take a minute just to recognize Steve and Scott Benson and Scott Kelly and his parties and all the time and effort they put into the TIF that we approved this evening. I think that's really going to be a positive impact on Lisbon that we really need to bring us onto the map. So thank you, Steve and Mr. Van Tynen, for all your input and your educating me on it, because I knew nothing about TIFs and everything. I really appreciate it, and I think it's going to be good for Lisbon, so thank you.
I have just a quick little note. I had the opportunity to stop into the library this week, and this past week, and I had a nice chat with our director, Diane Netto, and it was really nice to just catch up with her and hear about the how we're moving forward with our new library project. And also, it was really busy. It was middle of the day, and there were people in and out. There were students there studying. There were people relaxing and reading. There were young people of all ages, and so it was really great to see that. And the other thing that I talked about with Diane was how much I personally appreciated the fact that we have Wi-Fi at the library, because when my Wi-Fi went down and I had to check my email for council stuff, I just drove down the street to the library so I could check my email. And because I live in that neighborhood, I notice cars at odd times of day parked all around the library. So it's obvious that people are using the Wi-Fi, and it's a really good service. And at some point, I'm going to get really good at downloading books. So it was just a nice few minutes to spend at the library, and I just wanted to pass it on. So.
Anybody else? I just want to add a couple of things. I mean, as we all kind of read the papers, and sometimes the papers are not always the best thing to read because we get depressed, but there's a lot of stuff happening right now at the federal and the state level, and stuff that really need to pay attention to as a town. There's some proposals to actually kind of do away with our revenue sharing. Not do away with it, but just have the state spend it in other areas instead of allowing us to spend it locally. A lot of these are very concerning to the town, and we actually had our last meeting just a while back, and we kind of estimated between the town and the school with some of the proposals out there, it could be somewhere between, anywhere from $800,000 to $1.4 million loss for the town. As a council, this would be an extremely difficult year. We could almost get rid of all our non-essential services and not even take a part of that budget. So it is tough. So, I mean, what I encourage people to do is pay attention. And as this stuff moves forward, voice your concerns. It's always worthwhile to reach out to your representatives to actually, just ask them what's happening and get educated on it. Even at this point, they may not even have the answers, but it's one of those things the town really needs to be up on it, because a lot of this would actually mean the idea of the people in town taking a double hit. Number one, losing services, and secondly, getting a tax increase, and it would come as a package. It wouldn't come one or the other. So it would definitely be devastating. So it's definitely worth paying attention to. I know we actually asked Steve to put a Plan B in place, just in case this was to happen, because it would be ridiculous not to plan. And unfortunately, that Plan B, it would not be something that we would ever want to resort to, but unfortunately, it would be kind of foolish if we didn't plan for something, especially if it's actually being somewhat thought out at the state level. Again, this is all early level stuff. I mean, as we know, we read a lot of stuff that never happens, and we just hope this one doesn't happen, but we have to plan for it. The second part of what I'd like to bring out is, a while back, we actually had some concerns about Moxie. We actually had a couple Moxie meetings where we had to fill this room with a lot of concerned people. And one of the concerns that they had was the ability to come in the evening, to have some evening meetings for Moxie, so people that worked in the day can participate. The town did do that. They put a pretty decent schedule out there with multiple evening meetings. I did come last week just to attend, just to find out, and I was like one of 3 new people, which is kind of a little bit disheartening since the concern that we had about Moxie. So just in case people are not aware, I believe we advertise it and when these meetings are going to be. So if you have a concern about Moxie or have a will to actually help expand it or just keep it going, there was some evening meetings put in place for the general public to come in the evening to attend, and I would really encourage people to do so. The people that we have in place are awesome. It's going to happen. It's moving forward. There's some really great ideas, but there's always more room for people to participate. So, again, if you're interested in Moxie, keep an eye on the schedule, because there are opportunities for you to participate and help do the planning. And that's it.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
They are working on a new website right now. We have a new company that's going to be doing our website for us, and I got to view a little bit of it. It's going to be really good, and got some changes that are going to be going up there. And also, the theme contest has ended, and they'll be announcing that this weekend. The person who did the theme is from away, and they're flying in this weekend to come and receive their prize. So that will be announced. Yeah, it's really cool. He's flying in, yeah. He's very excited to have won the theme contest, and actually I've talked with him online a little bit, being the parade chairman. He's also going to be a parade judge, but he's coming in this weekend and going to be meeting him this weekend. So sounds like it's going to be a good, and I just want to encourage businesses to think about doing a float in Moxie. I used to do them years ago for our church, and we used to have a lot of church, and a lot of fun with our church, and we would stay up till 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning doing our float, but we had a great time doing it, and it's a great time as a business just to showcase who you are. If you have an organization that you want to represent, it's a great time to represent your organization, and it just makes Moxie more fun when we have more floats. So something to consider, and gives you plenty of time to plan in the cold winter nights. You can plan your Moxie float. So, thank you.
And
I have one more thing.
Sure.
Just Verla Brooks, our Director of Parks, held a meeting last week on her gardens and the Green Thumb Gang and volunteers, and she put together a spreadsheet for me. And it is absolutely amazing the number of volunteers we have doing gardens. And of all the gardens that we have 8 gardens available. If you want more volunteers, if you'd like to adopt a spot, we have funding that we raise every year. And we have the cost, usually, our total cost for our budget is $7,000, but we get $3,300 in donations from businesses who take care of parks and some of our gardens. It's quite impressive, the numbers. So if you're interested in being part of that, adopt a spot in some of our other gardens, contact Verla at the Beaver Park, and get on board. It's a lot of fun.
And not just local. I mean, last year I was amazed. There was actually people that come from out of town to actually tend gardens in town here just because they believe they're so beautiful. That's pretty amazing if you think about it. If nothing else, we'll move on.
And next is the executive session, orders 2013 through 17 and 2013, 17, and 18. To go into executive session for 1 MRSA Section 4056A Personnel Matter, Town Manager's Review, and Section 4056A Personnel Matter Finance Committee Applications. Although you've done that one, right?
Yes.
So it's just 17.
Correct.
Okay.
Entertain motion to move.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Order passed,
And there
7-0.
will be no vote at the end of this, so it's just for us. No, we have to come back after to adjourn, right?
Yeah.